Well, I think what you're seeing here, Sean, is that the market is still very, very tight, but generally the market has been rising. A bit of a misnomer here in terms of Clare, where we're saying that the headline is that property prices fell back by €10,000 in the year. That's probably down to, maybe a lower level of transactions or a certain I suppose the market kind of becoming a bit more uncertain. But overall, what you're seeing in Clare is that there are only 245 properties available for sale at the end of March. There was a decrease of 9% in the quarter. So it's exceptionally tight in terms of the supply that's coming.
Mm.
And prices basically stayed stagnant in the last 3 months. So
And
depending on what will happen in relation to supply, you're likely to see that the market may start rising again in the coming months as we head into the summer.
that decline in properties for sale, 245, down 9%, can we attribute that to the uncertainty, the instability of the market?
I think there's a bit of seasonality in this. If I look at many other counties, there would always be a slight dip in supply, certainly in the first 2 months of the year. The weather was exceptionally bad as well in January and February, so that might have turned people off getting their photographs done and so on. But certainly what you can see in the last month, in March in particular, is that there's been a strong uplift in the number of properties coming to the market. So I expect that supply figure will start to move into more positive percentages as the months are ahead of us. So, I think there's a seasonality element to it. There could be a bit of, let's wait and see what the market is doing in Clare. My sense is that isn't the case. It is still exceptionally tight, and generally it's a rising marketplace.
Mm-hmm. And on that subject of supply, we see that two-bed apartments in Clare are up 9% in the last 12 months to €180,000. Would you put that down to the shortage in the market of suitable properties?
Possibly. It could also be speaking to an affordability level. Generally, what we can see in the national figures, and Clare would fall into this headline as well, is that affordability has become stretched. That's why there has been an easing of property price inflation in the last year or so. So affordability and a person's ability to get a mortgage and get on the ladder is core to underpinning price increases. So we can see that affordability and stretched affordability is now having an impact in slowing down that inflation, or that rate of inflation that's been happening. And I think it is worth saying, Sean, that we've seen the fifth consecutive quarter now where nationally asking price inflation has eased. And that is certainly, giving us confidence to say that it's likely that Irish house price inflation this year will slow to more like 4% in the year. I would have been speaking to Clare FM many times, and I would have been talking about inflation figures 11%, 9%, and now we're at just over 4.7% nationally. So you can see the trend line here. While we're still in a market where generally prices are rising, the rate of inflation has certainly started to ease back somewhat.
And just a final, slightly broader question for you, Joanne, and this might be a little bit speculative, but we are seeing great economic uncertainty at the moment due to a range of global factors, and we're seeing certain potential causes for concern, such as car sales dropping off in the last month, a little bit of a decline there. Would you foresee that the number of people looking to seek out properties in the coming months could drop off depending on global factors?
Well, look, it's fair to say we're living in extremely volatile times. We can see what's happened, in relation to the ceasefire. There's been a dramatic reduction in oil prices today. We can't predict how this will play out, but clearly oil prices, cost construction, and if that was to increase again, that is going to have an impact on construction costs. There's no doubt about that. But we can already see that people are reluctant to put their homes up for sale as they feel they may not be able to secure an alternative property to buy. The risk in the Middle East and rising inflation will certainly look to exacerbate that. I think it's too early to say really if there's going to be a downturn in prices, And should that be the case, we'll revisit our forecast. But our forecast today remains at 4% for the year inflation.